Hey everybody, and welcome to my second Sonic month. An entire month filled with fun, high-speed adventure, bad level design, and sometimes even slow, tedious confusion. We go back and forth. This is the time of year where I sit back and play some of my favorite games, Sonic games, and also some of my most hated games, Sonic games. We go back and forth. But anyways, I'm a huge Sonic fan. I've played most of the games in the entire franchise, and let me tell you, there are quite a few. But there's one Sonic game that I've actually never played before. Knuckles Chaotix, the flagship Sonic game for the Sega 32X. In case any of you don't know what the Sega 32X is, I gave an explanation on exactly what it is in my old Night Trap review, but I'll give an extremely fast lesson on what it is right now. This is a Sega Genesis. This thing over here is the Sega CD, and this growth on top of the beast is the Sega 32X. While the Sega CD was designed to play games on a disc, the 32X played regular old cartridges, except these ones used 32 bits as opposed to 16. Most of the time, I honestly don't see much of a difference. Honestly, the term bit always seemed kind of pointless to me in a way. Most people have no idea what it means. But anyway, the Sega CD might not have been great, but it did have a small library of games, and some of them actually weren't that bad. The Sega 32X, on the other hand, was pretty bad. It had an extremely small and lackluster library of games. I'm talking like, there's less than 40 games released in North America. And out of all of those, there's pretty much no good ones. Okay, that's not true. There's a couple that are okay, but most of those are just inferior ports of other games. Knuckles Chaotix is a strange one though, because some people say that it's the exception. It's definitely the most popular Sega 32X game. I say some people because you'd be surprised how few people have ever actually played this game. Unlike other Sonic games, this game has never really truly been re-released. It was never released on Virtual Console or in any of Sega's many Genesis or Sonic collections, not even as a secret unlockable game or anything like that. It's not even available on Steam. The only time that this game was officially re-released was on GameTap, whatever the hell that is, for the PC, for apparently a very brief period of time in 2007. So at the time of this video being released, the only ways to play Knuckles Chaotix are through unofficial emulators or by owning the actual game. And let me remind you, this is not a Sega Genesis game. This is a Sega 32X game. So to play it, you not only need this pretty rare game, but you also need a Sega Genesis and a Sega 32X attachment. So yeah, no wonder not many people talk about this game. And like I said, until making this video, I'd never played it either. I've been waiting for this Sonic month with bated breath because I've always wanted to play this. Ever since I first heard of it, I've been curious. So how about we just dive right in? So, the plot of this game is relatively simple, but apparently it differs between the North American and Japanese versions of the game. But none of that really matters, so here's what the plot is as far as I can tell. I'm not really gonna read up on it. The plot is that Eggman is doing some evil stuff and capturing all the members of Team Chaotix, until Knuckles comes along and stops him. Eggman also has some sort of futuristic theme park, and there's a new bunch of magical MacGuffins to replace the Chaos Emeralds, the 6 Chaos Rings. It's a pretty simple plot, honestly. Although, aside from in the expanded universe, comics and stuff, since when has Knuckles had any association with Team Chaotix? Well, since Knuckles Chaotix, I guess. In a lot of ways, this game is very similar to the classic Sonic trilogy. Obviously, it's a side-scrolling Knuckles game. You spin dash, go through loops, and collect rings. But it has some very substantial differences. For one, Sonic isn't even technically in the game. Well, okay, he's in the credits, but you can't play as him. Instead, you play as Knuckles and the members of Team Chaotix. Also, the big differences in gameplay are pretty obvious when you first start the game, because this game starts with a gameplay tutorial. Yeah, so if you were going into this game thinking that you were just gonna get a classic style Sonic game just with some new characters, then you are wrong. Pretty obviously so, because what classic Sonic game needs a tutorial? You play this game controlling two characters who are connected by a bungee cable. A bungee cable made out of stars. Okay. It's hard to explain, and it's even harder to master. But I'll try to explain how the controls work the best I can. You can spin dash like usual, but it's not really gonna get you far. It's not nearly as effective as usual. In its place, you're supposed to use the power of the bungee cable. By holding down the B button, your partner will hold himself in place. You then have to pull on the cable in a different direction, building up tension. And then, when you release the B button, you'll be sent flying. It's all about using the physics of this rope connecting them in order to fling yourself around. It's a neat concept, honestly, if not a little cumbersome. No matter how long I played this game, I never really seemed to get a complete hang of the bungee mechanic. And that's not to say that it's bad or that I'm terrible at it. I can use it fairly well, and I was able to get through the game no problem. But there were always spots here and there where I just bounce around when I wasn't trying to, and vice versa. There are even parts in this game where the physics just seem to go nuts, and my characters are just flying around like crazy. And there are quite a few spots in this game where I try to bounce on a spring, only to have my partner pull me back down, or somehow keep me from bouncing high enough. Like any 2D Sonic game, this game has bonus stages. They work the same as they did in Sonic 1. Collect 50 rings, and then at the end of the stage, you get to play a bonus level. Complete that, and you're rewarded with one of the 6 Chaos Rings. And in order to get the best ending, you need these rings. The special stages are actually a lot of fun, and at times, weirdly enough, even more fun than the regular game. These special stages are fairly impressive. You run through a big 3D environment and avoid stuff. It's pretty cool. Okay, maybe it's nothing beautiful by today's standards, but it's honestly pretty damn impressive to see this running on a Sega Genesis. It's pretty much the only part of the game that looks like it's fully utilizing the extra 16 bits from the Sega 32X. That's not to say that the rest of this game looks ugly though, far from it, this game looks great. I don't necessarily think that it looks better than Sonic 3, but it's definitely more colorful. I mean, look at all this. Look at all this color. It's just so much color. I feel like I'm gonna overdose on all of this color and die. Hey noob, have you seen my Jolly Ranchers? Oh god, no! He ate my freaking candy! Okay, joking aside, this game looks very nice. There's a lot going on, but it rarely feels too cluttered. I can always tell where I am on the screen. The game also has a very obvious style, sort of techno and futuristic. The only real complaint I guess that I have is, although the game is colorful, and indeed it is nice to look at, it doesn't have much visual variety. Or at least not as much as the regular Sonic games. There's a factory level, a tropical level, sure, but all of these levels just sort of seem to fit the same general theme, with neon-style lights plastered all over the place. The tropical forest level is probably the best looking one, because at least it looks kind of different. There are 5 levels in total: Botanic Base, Speed Slider, Amazing Arena, Techno Tower, and Marina Madness. For the most part, they're not really unique or memorable. You could probably throw me into any of the Speed Slider levels and tell me that it's from Amazing Arena, and I'd probably believe you. This is also pretty reflective of my thoughts on the gameplay. When I started this game, I was still having quite a bit of fun, but as the game went on, I began to realize something. The level design is nothing special. The bungee ring mechanic is interesting, but it's not better than just spin dashing in any way. There are only really a few unique things that it can do, and this game hardly ever switches things up. Every single level of this game is pretty much the same thing when you boil it down. You running around a big, almost labyrinth-like level with enemies and platforms placed around seemingly randomly, and trying to find my way to the end goal. Most of these levels feel like this. This is fairly fun for a few levels, but for me personally, playing through this game pretty much in one sitting for this review, it got pretty boring near the end. The game feels a little too open. The Sonic games were always fairly linear. You never really had trouble figuring out where to go. It was pretty much always just to the right. And to make matters worse, you can play these levels in any order. The next level you play is decided by a roulette. So, because of this, there's not really much of a difficulty curve. The game doesn't get harder as it goes on. Except for the special stages. They're the only part of this game that progressively gets more difficult and complex as they go on. These special stages start out fairly simple. Avoid touching the spiky balls while running around a giant cylinder collecting blue orbs. Fairly familiar to past games. But then they introduce walls to jump up, platforms to jump to. There's bumpers that bump you back, and you often have to strategically use these in order to avoid death and to collect the orbs. There are springs that send you flying, and often the cylindrical tube that you're running in opens up and you get to run along flat ground and narrow passageways. These stages can get kind of intense. Honestly, I love these special stages. They're my favorite part of this game. And because of the sense of progression that they have and the rest of the game doesn't, in a weird way, these 3D stages feel more like the actual game, and the normal levels feel more like they're just meant for getting rings so that I can play these special stages longer. I mean, it honestly makes more sense than you'd think. The regular levels in this game are extremely easy. You almost never die in this game, except for the special stages. But anyway, I'll stop bad-mouthing the game for a bit because it's not awful or anything. It's not at all, it's just flawed. So how about we talk about some of the positives? Along with the great graphics, this game has an awesome soundtrack. Like any Sonic game, it's filled with catchy songs that really do fit the levels. I feel like I've really been missing out on that lately. The different characters in this game are pretty cool too. And I mean in a gameplay sense, because each of these characters have different abilities. Knuckles can obviously glide and climb up walls, Espio can run on walls and ceilings, Charmy can fly, Vector has a double jump as well as wall climbing, and Mighty can do a wall jump. Oh yeah, this is Mighty the Armadillo. He's in this game. What's that? You have no idea who this character is? Yeah, well, join the club. Honestly, I found Charmy to be the worst character. Not being able to spin dash or even really jump is just kind of weird feeling, and being able to fly infinitely in any direction just feels like cheating. There's no limit to it, it's just not fun. Vector, on the other hand, might just be the best character. His double jump is more like a mid-air dash, so not only can you use it to jump much higher, but you can also use it to quickly gain speed. And I mean, just look at that walk cycle. God, he is so cool. Mighty is also pretty good, honestly. His wall jump can be used to climb walls much faster than any other character, even Espio. And also, why the hell did Sega get rid of Mighty but keep Charmy around for so long? I understand that they needed a flying character for Sonic Heroes, but really, why couldn't they have brought him back since then? Who the hell even likes Charmy? He's one of the most annoying Sonic characters there is. Mighty looks cool, I like his design, but Charmy? I mean, just look at him! Yeah, I'm not a fan. Near the end of the game, I finally come across a boss fight. And then another. And then another. I'm sensing a theme. Each of the 5 levels has 5 stages, and the 5th is a boss fight. But since you select these levels using a random roulette, you could possibly go a long time without any boss battles. This happened to me when I played, and honestly it made the game feel very weirdly balanced and paced, since I ended up fighting all of the bosses basically at the end. Okay, before I move on to the end and wrap this thing up, I should probably talk a bit about the multiplayer mode. I say briefly because there's not a lot to say, honestly. It's not very good. Pretty obviously, in the multiplayer mode, each player controls each of the 2 characters connected together. In multiplayer mode, the bungee mechanic is pretty useless. It's really hard to pull off the correct timing with a second player. And honestly, the spin dash works a lot better when 2 people are doing it. But it's hard to explain. The multiplayer mode is just boring. And crazy. The physics tend to go nuts half the time, and communicating with a second player can be quite annoying. This game should have been built from the ground up for multiplayer. The other games had multiplayer, but since the camera just followed player 1, God knows Tails is screwed, he can't keep up. But here, you're tied together. It seems like the perfect Sonic game for multiplayer. And yet, this game is even worse with 2 people. How is that even possible? Alright, so, back to the beauty of 1 player. I'm at the end of the game. Eggman uses some giant super ring to power up Metal Sonic and turn him into— holy crap! Okay, admittedly this final boss is pretty awesome. It's extremely easy, like the rest of the game, but damn it, it's cool looking enough that I'll give it a pass. So, if you complete this game without collecting all of the Chaos Rings, then you will receive the bad ending, which has Metal Sonic in his newfound form, flying over a fiery city, destroying it, and it's a pretty lame and underwhelming ending, honestly. And sadly, if you do collect all of the Chaos Rings, the good ending isn't much better. You beat the boss, he blows up, and it immediately cuts to the shot of the Chaos Rings, showing that I got them all. And then it cuts straight to the credits. Sure, it isn't Metal Sonic blowing up a city anymore, and sure, you get to see Sonic and Tails for some reason, but it's still a pretty awful ending. There's no cutscene after you kill the boss that segues into the credits. You just beat him, and then boom, you did it! Thanks for playing. This game is really lucky that the special stages were the highlight and I loved them so much, because if they were as boring and frustrating as most Sonic games' special stages are, then getting the good ending would not have been worth it at all. So what's the bottom line? What's my consensus after all of this? Well, the game looks great. I don't necessarily think it looks better than Sonic 3, but it still looks really good, and the music is really great too. But the level design is often downright lazy, and the overall gameplay is as well. The bungee mechanic is neat, and it can be kind of fun sometimes, but never fully utilized any better than a spin dash, and often it just kind of becomes a hindrance. But despite this game really isn't awful. It's really repetitive, but it's still relatively fun. I know that I at least had fun playing it. It's just probably not worth tracking down and paying a large amount of money on, unless you're a huge Sonic fan like me. But yeah, if you really want to play it, and you enjoy the classic trilogy a lot, then you'll most likely find some enjoyment out of this game. Just don't expect something amazing or absolutely perfect. Despite its flaws, I'm still glad that I played it. I can see why people would call this the best Sega 32X game. And despite the level design not always being very good, a surprising amount of effort still obviously went into this game. And that's it for video number 1 of my second Sonic month. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time when I review a certain portable Sonic game. I don't really have anything to say to segue into it now that I think about it. It's just not really a good game. I'll see you then!